Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET, and we are so thrilled that you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 16 going on 17 novels of suspense. My current book is One Wrong Word on the door behind me, as you can see, and my upcoming book is called All This Could Be Yours, another cat and mouse thriller, which happily or not comes out on the same day as Dan Brown's new book. So there is nothing we can do about that except have you say, every time you hear that Dan Brown's new book is coming out, you think, oh, my friend Hank's book is coming out that same day, and we will just go with that. All This Could Be Yours. But we are not here today to talk about me or my book. I am here today to tell you about The Inheritance by Trisha Sakhlecha. And I have to tell you, you all, I finished this a couple of days ago, and I am still thinking about it. I am still haunted by it. I am still wondering what decisions I would have made. Would they be the same as what the characters made? It is riveting. It is haunting. It is unique. It is surprising. I can always figure out what happens in a book. I can always figure it out. I could not in a million years have predicted what happened in this book. Can I just say this, just not right now, wait till the show is over, but just go get this book. You will absolutely love it. It is out right now from Pamela Dorman Books, and that means you know it's going to be fabulous. And Trisha is joining us today from London, so thank you for that. I see all of you are here. Shannon Hansen is here, Susie Baldwin, and Deborah, Betty Fellows, Randy T. Deborah says, I'm in Northwest Ohio, where it is frigid, and Robin Stahl and Renee is here. This is so great. And Shannon Hansen, everyone is welcoming you, Trisha, and cannot wait to hear about The Inheritance. What is it like to have, it's your first novel, it's getting rave reviews from everywhere. What is that like for you?
Thank you, Hank. It's incredible. It's my first novel out in the US, but it's actually my third novel to be published. So third novel out in the UK and beyond. But it's, it doesn't matter how many novels you've written. It's still an incredible feeling, as you well know. And I've been very lucky that, with the first book that's out in the US, I've gotten so much love, whether that's from reviewers or from readers. So it's just been incredible to see the book get so much love.
I mean, to have your first two books out in the UK and then move to also have a book out in the US, a debut author in the US, it's interesting because that's such new territory for you. What did you think about having this new audience be able to read your novels?
It was really interesting, especially during the edit process, because we were very aware of the fact that it's going out also to American readers, and that's not a consideration that I'd had before. I think, it's having a debut out is always, it feels like a blank slate. It feels like the first day of school. So I think that's predominantly what it feels like in the US for me.
Although the first day of school could be marvelous or it can be terrifying, or a little bit of each. It didn't feel like it was edited to be any different than it would have been had it been published anywhere. You didn't sort of Americanize it in any way, did you?
Except for changing some colloquialisms, no. The story itself is exactly the same. The plot is the same. The structure is the same. But yes, of course, there's certain terms that you do change between the UK and the US, and that was interesting.
Yes, and I mean, but it's so seamlessly written and so gorgeous to read. We're talking about you all. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Lori Hernandez says, "Oh, it's about the family who wants to kill you." What? You don't just read the book. Don't even guess. Just don't even guess what The Inheritance is about. Although it has been described as succession on an isolated island? What is the
something like that? Yeah, Succession on an isolated island with a murder thrown in. So Succession meets Agatha Christie, maybe.
Succession meets Agatha Christie. Yeah. I mean, that is a high bar, and I will just gush one more time to say it's more than the sum of that. It is especially Trisha Sakhlecha only you could have written this, and it's absolutely fantastic. Let me just welcome you all to A Mighty Blaze. If you are new to A Mighty Blaze, welcome, welcome, welcome. This is a great day to pick to come for your first time, and your veterans, we love having you here. A Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic 5 years ago now by the wonderful duo of Caroline Levitt and Jenna Blum to keep us discovering new books and discovering new authors and staying in touch with our favorite authors and maybe making some new favorite authors, like maybe you will today with Trisha, and keeping us reading and keeping us together in the writing community. Again, we're going to give away, well, we're not giving away. Trisha is giving away. Pamela Dorman is giving away. I'm not giving up this. I'm keeping this one. A copy of The Inheritance to one lucky commenter. And so leave a question, leave a comment, leave applause, leave whatever you want in the comments. We'll spin the wheel of fun at the end and give a lucky winner a copy of the book. Let me just tell you that Trisha Sakhlecha grew up in New Delhi and now splits her time between Berlin and London. She is a diplomat currently working as director of the Tagore Center at the Embassy of India. In the past, Sakhlecha has worked in the fashion industry as a business consultant, a designer, and a trend forecaster. The Inheritance is her U.S. debut. I was going to say something about trend forecasting for this, the glory of The Inheritance, because every single person should read this. Tell us a little bit about the book, Trisha.
So the book is about it features the Agarwal family who gathered together on a Scottish island off the west coast of Scotland. It's a private island. They gathered together there to celebrate the 40th wedding anniversary of the parents in the family, Raj and Shalini. So Raj is the patriarch. He's also the owner of a £300 million business based in Delhi, which he's about to retire from and sell. And the three adult children, Myra, Asim, and Aisha, are all there at the island to celebrate their parents' wedding anniversary and, celebrate family, but also to see which one of them is going to get the biggest piece of the pie when the sale goes through. So it's a novel that is about a family holiday that ends in murder. It's also about the legacy of trauma. It's also about sibling relationships. And it's about the lengths that we will go to claim what we believe is ours.
I so agree. It's also about justice and revenge and betrayal and marriage and parenthood. So many big topics all wrapped up in this really riveting, well-written, incredible story. Let's just talk about some of those things. Sibling rivalry plays such a role in this. Little sibling rivalry, little birth order, little greed. Talk a little bit about why sibling rivalry is such a powerful topic in a psychological thriller.
I think it's one of our formative relationships. So other than your parents, those of us who are, lucky or unlucky, depending on our day and mood, to have siblings, know that those are the people who know us best, who've known us the longest, most certainly, if not best. They're the only people other than our parents who quite often may not see the world in the same way that we do, but they will certainly spot the same things that we do, because we are products of the same upbringing. And what that means is you've simultaneously got one person who will always know what you're talking about, but also that is the one person who you've grown up competing with. Siblings by their very nature compete for the love and attention of their parents. And as you grow into adulthood, I think that spirit of competition very rarely leaves us. I've got a younger brother, and I always say to everyone that he is the book is dedicated to him actually. And I say there that he's my number one rival for life. I think if I was feeling a little less polite, I'd probably say my number one enemy for life. But he's also my number one cheerleader. And that contrast and dichotomy is something that you only see in sibling relationships. You want that sort of high stakes, high contrast, conflicted relationship in a psychological thriller, because it just amps up the drama.
And if you have that high stakes, high conflict relationship, and then add a lot of money to it, and add, when we talk about inheritance, and I'll talk about more about that in a minute, but when you talk about an inheritance, when it comes from a will or money or a disbursement of shares of a thing that siblings are now competing for, like succession, if we all know about that. Why does that element of money and greed and manipulation, that all adds to the problem in the first place, the sibling rivalry in the first place?
I think what happens quite often in these relationships is that, yes, they're fighting over money, and yes, there's greed involved, but quite often when you get down to it, it's not about the money at all. The money is just a representation of all that we just spoke about, that conflict and the need to best one another. And that is just made concrete with the idea of money. In this particular family, the amount of money involved is very, very large. It's a life-changing sum for any of the three siblings. But I think what also happens in adulthood is that it's not just the three of them. So, even if for Myra, Zoe, and Asim, it's not so much about the money, even though they may like to believe that it is, it's more about who is the favorite of the father and who is the favorite of the mother. That's the core thing. But you've also now got spouses and significant others involved, and that complicates things further. Sorry.
It makes me realize that what I do want to do is have you introduce us to who I would think are the three main characters, who are Myra and Asim and Aisha. Can you tell us a little bit about them? They are the siblings.
Yes. So Myra is the eldest sibling. She is sort of the golden child. She's had a fantastic career as a lawyer in Scotland and the UK. And she's now moved to Kilbride, which is an island off the west coast of Scotland, which she owns. And she's working on redeveloping it. She's estranged from her husband. And there's a whole story as to why that estrangement has taken place. But at her core, she's driven by the need to set an example for her siblings, to be the perfect one in the family. Then you've got Asim, who's the son. He's the second sibling. He is the COO of the family business. He feels hugely indebted to his parents. He's very deferential when it comes to his father. And he's torn between his love for his parents and his sense of duty, and his love for his wife, Zoe, who is a British influencer who gave up everything she knew about home to move to Delhi and live with Asim in the family home. So they live with the parents. And that for Zoe, who is, basically a London born woman, for her, that comes as a huge culture shock to suddenly have to live with your parents-in-law. Even though it may be in, utmost luxury, it feels like a gilded cage somewhat. And then you've got Aisha. She is the baby of the family. She is properly spoiled by everyone. And that means that she is not just rebellious, but she's also a touch arrogant. She's also got, a childlike innocence about her, which makes her charming. And she's the one person who could get away with anything in the family. And she is also something of a heartbreaker. She's had a run of totally inappropriate boyfriends. So that's the three siblings in the mix.
And the thing that I thought was one of the many things I thought was so impressive about this book is that there are the three siblings and boyfriend, girlfriend, spouses. I'm not even going to talk about it. The mother and father and other people in the book as well. But you really carefully differentiate each one so spectacularly. It is. We feel as if we know them and we get to know them better along the way. Did the characters develop for you as you wrote the novel? And is that how you were able to make them be so distinct and recognizable? Or did you work on them before and then weave them in?
I worked on them before. For me, I always work on the characters before. I need to know exactly who they are. And I mean, of course, that being said, there's always certain things that characters will do that will surprise you. But I knew the core of who they were and their backstories before I started writing. I like to have an overall shape of each character's sort of arc through the novel before I get writing.
But that must have included, or did it, that each character in this novel has a powerful secret. And you dole those out just with massively wonderful suspense throughout. Did you know what each character's secret was?
I knew at the beginning what the main secrets were, but then, of course, all of them have, some of them have bigger secrets, some of them have smaller secrets, some of them have multiple secrets. So the layering of those secrets is something that I did maybe when I was halfway through the draft. And I did really because there's so many characters and so many secrets. I had to do like a diagram of the secrets. So, okay, what's Myra hiding? What's Zoe hiding? What's Asim hiding? When does what get revealed? At what point does it first get mentioned? And what is the domino effect on each of the characters? Because when you're in a family, a secret being revealed has an impact on each person. So I did about halfway through the draft. I was just like, this is getting way too confusing. I need a diagram.
I mean, it's interesting to hear that, because you do it so successfully because I want to see the diagram of secrets. The reader doesn't need a diagram. It is extremely easy to follow the story. And the thing that's so interesting about secrets as well is that the string that each secret pulls entwines some other characters, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes only one person knows the secret. Sometimes several people know the secret. And it's just as interesting to see who doesn't know as who does know. And that was fantastically done. On the cover of the book, Sophie Hannah, one of my very favorite authors, Sophie Hannah, called this unpredictable. And when I saw that, I thought, I know it's succession on an isolated island, far from deserted. So I thought, well, so what can be unpredictable about that? Well, I know what's coming here. And I did not know. So did you know what you were getting into as you started writing this novel? What was the first nugget of the idea of this book?
The first nugget was actually the first chapter. Oh. So for me, quite often a book starts with like one image. And the one image that I had in my mind when I started thinking about this book was of someone running through the woods covered in a family member's blood. And then, I just kept pulling at it. Who is this person? Why are they covered in a family member's blood? Where are they running from? Where are they running to? Who are the other people in the family? And I think I spent a good few, maybe 8 or 10 months, just sort of turning that scene around and trying to work out exactly what was going on. And that's sort of the inception point of the novel. The other inception point of the novel is that I actually stayed on a very similar island. And I remember I was on a writing trip there, and I was working on an edit. And I was in one of 7 cottages on the island. This island had no cell signal, no Wi-Fi. I didn't see a single person for the entire 10, 12 days I was there. And every time I would hear so much as a peep, I would jump. So it was these two things coming together, and that's where the novel was born.
So much to unpack in those things. Let's take the first thing first. The idea that you worked on this for 8 or 9 months, if you said, just to figure out who the family was. What do you think about that? I mean, your writer mind is creating a new world out of something in your head says, this is going to be a good story, but I don't quite know what it is that yet. Can you talk a little bit about that writer mind and how Darlene's saying, I love Trisha's book ladder. I know we all
amazing.
We all want more. Thank you, Darlene. We're lining up in envy. What do you think about that writer brain process? What do you think about thinking?
It's such a tough spot to be in. I feel like, every time I start a new book, I find myself in that spot. Because on the one hand, that unless you do that thinking work and unless you get to know the characters, the book isn't going to feel fully developed, or the plot won't feel fully developed. But at the same time, when you're actually in that space, there is nothing scarier. because like you said, you don't know where it's going to end. You could keep thinking about these characters for a year, and then get to a point where you just feel like, actually, it's not good enough and I've got to set it aside. But I suppose you have to see the good in it, and you have to see the creative energy in that. Because if you don't, then it's a really sorry state of affairs to be stuck in that position.
I mean, it's interesting because you have written books before, so you know you can do it, and you know that, as a human being, we're the only creatures who can do that. You can make up a story.
Yes.
That's great. And the idea that you can make up a story and your brain knows you're going to do that. I mean, that's sort of what I'm getting at. Is that sort of exciting, isn't it?
Yes, it is exciting. It is exciting. It's also nerve-wracking sometimes, but it's also really enjoyable to get to know new characters.
Exactly.
To draw backstories, to eavesdrop on conversations in coffee shops and think, oh, could this go in? Could that go in? That's the fun.
I know. Sometimes I'll be sitting there, and my husband will say, "You're in your book world, aren't you?" And you're hearing the things that are happening in your book world. It's also about damaged people and trauma and how that works. I don't want to go too far about that. Did you do research into how trauma works on people? Talk a little bit about that element of the book.
I actually went on a psychology for characters course a few years ago, and I found that super helpful. It was essentially a week-long crash course into psychology, so to say. And we did a lot of work around trauma, around childhood trauma in particular, because childhood trauma doesn't have to be something big. It could be something as small as being the person who was always left out in the schoolyard. But how it manifests into adulthood is what is most interesting when you're writing a psychological thriller. So I spent a lot of time thinking about what makes each of the characters who they are. And for me, that always harks back to childhood and the relationships that they had in the family of origin.
Because we all talk about how we go home for Thanksgiving or whatever, and we revert to how we were when we were young. We're never not that person. Another thing, and I want to sort of touch on more of these things. We're talking about The Inheritance by Trisha Sakhlecha, which is, I'll get this right. Phillippi is just as difficult if you don't say it enough. Which is just out, her first book in the US, which is absolutely marvelous. The book is also about what we mean by justice. I thought about that a lot in the book, that there's moral justice, legal justice, emotional justice, whatever there is. Did that play into your mind at all? How far someone would go to make things be right, and what does right mean?
I think that the second part of your question, what does right mean, and how do you know what the right thing is for you? I think that is something I thought about a lot. I also thought a lot about this idea of conscience. All of us believe ourselves to be conscientious people. We all believe we have a moral compass. But quite often when our loved ones are involved, or when families are involved, that compass can shift quite drastically. Particularly when the stakes are high. And when I first started writing the novel, we were in the middle of the pandemic. And I remember at that time seeing a lot of people do really, really questionable things that would, be unjust, that would be things that they would themselves be quite upset about in another time and space. But people were doing all sorts of things because you felt compelled to protect your families. And that just got me thinking that, when the stakes are impossibly high, is there a right choice? Is there any moment where your conscience can trump the safety of your family?
I mean, it's just the book is so thought-provoking. Again, we're talking about The Inheritance by Trisha Sakhlecha. And the other thing a couple more things. The other thing that I loved about this book is, when you have the core family, There are people who are inside the family and there are people who are outside the family. When you have a certain culture, there are people who are in the culture and outside of the culture. And that on so many levels, they come to an island in Scotland, which is outside of their culture. Can you talk about that inside outsideness and the clash of cultures and how important that is to the book?
Sorry, excuse me one sec. So I think the idea of outsiders in general in fiction works really, really well. I think most of our favorite books have some degree of that. But I think what I've always seen as, as an Indian woman who's lived in the UK for a really long time now, is in mainstream fiction, the Indian characters are always the outsiders. What I wanted to do with The Inheritance was flip that. I wanted Zoe, who's a British woman, to feel like the outsider in this family. Yes, there is an element of them being the outsiders, being on this Scottish island, particularly Myra being the outsider as, an Indian woman who owns an island in Scotland, which we know is quite a community-led place anyway. So she always feels like an outsider. But for me, what was most important was flipping that narrative and trying to place Zoe in that spot where she simultaneously felt at home because she is at home in the UK, but she's never quite a part of the family. She's never had the kind of access that they've had. She's never had the kind of close relationships that they've had. And culturally, she just doesn't seem to get a lot of things, not in the least the way her husband wears duty so lightly. And for her, it feels like he's carrying this huge baggage, but for him, it's something he wears very lightly because culturally, that's very, very, it's woven into an Indian son's DNA almost.
It was incredibly fascinating to be drawn into that family relationship because you write it so gorgeously that it is very clear to us how Zoe sees it and how the family sees it as this is not a big deal. This is just how it is. This is just what we do. It's also just as layered as the title, The Inheritance. It's also a book about history, not only family history, but the history of places. And I'm wondering about Kilbride, the island. Is that a real place? And how did you find out about it? And the history of the island is so shocking. Is that true as well?
The history of the island is completely made up. It's based on, I'm so sorry to disappoint. It's based on, it's sort of a composite of the history of many places in Scotland, which went through, a lot of Scottish islands have a very colorful history, have a very traumatic history. So it's a lot of these stories woven together. The island does not exist. It's a made-up island, but it is based loosely on the island that I stayed at way back in, I think it was 2015. It must have been.
But it's first of all, I'm in awe because it was just brilliant. And I think I said to my husband something like, "This is so interesting. Did you know this about Scotland?" And my husband's like, "No." And to hear it's made up. I'm sure some of it is actually real, because you said it's a composite, so that's good. Good.
Yes.
I feel about that. But the feeling, the depth of the setting, the immersiveness of the setting comes through so clearly. I mean, the slick leaves and the ocean and the rocks and the feel of the sounds in the night and what could that be? How did you, when you're writing, do you put yourself there? Are you sort of immersing yourself as you're at your desk writing? Are you putting yourself there?
I am, and I've got a few tricks up my sleeve that I use for that. For this particular book, it was smell for some reason. With the other books, sometimes it's been music, sometimes it's been a certain picture, but for this book, it was a smell, and it was the smell of sort of, a leather Chesterfield in a forest cabin with a roaring fire. That's the exact smell that would always take me back to the place. And I had a candle that kind of smells like that, which I would light every time I needed to take myself back there. But also just going back a little bit to your previous question about the history. So, without giving any spoilers away, the particular period of history that is mentioned and all of that is true. It's just not something that is linked particularly to one island.
Okay.
Just to clarify,
Okay.
all of that did take place in Scotland in that time period, and that has led to some of the issues that come up later on in the book in Scotland, but it was just not specific to anything.
Okay. That I'm with you. I'm with you on
that. So just to clarify, and then the other thing I wanted to say was, for me as well, you mentioned about how evocative the setting is. I always think about, I think a lot of us always think about settings as characters, but I also like to think about what a place has gone through, and how that impacts the psychology of the landscape, so to speak. And that's what I wanted to do with it.
Yes, and that's exactly what I was going to say, is that when I'm talking about history, the layers of history on your fictional island, the layers of history in real life, the layers of history of your fictional characters, all those layers are so gorgeously metaphorically worked into the story. The peeling away of how the past affects the present and the future.
Yes, and it's I think that's sort of the beauty of books. You can see that. You can see how a character, how they get layered from a child to an adult to going through various stages of their life. So I'm glad that that came through.
Oh, it came through gorgeously. We're talking about The Inheritance, sort of Succession meets Agatha Christie. If you think you know what that means, you kind of do. But then if you read this marvelous book by Trisha Sakhlecha, you will get a whole new look at it. Let me ask you one more question.
That is the perfect pronunciation, by the way. It's a tongue twister, so thank you for getting it right.
It shouldn't be. Thank you, though. This book is a wonderful murder mystery, but it's also really wonderful psychological suspense, and about how we human beings do physical damage to each other, but we also do emotional damage to each other, and the emotional damage that we can inflict on our fellow human beings can be equally destructive. You were talking about your class about that. Was that taken into, did you take that into account as well, how destructive we can be to each other?
Absolutely. And I think that's a core part of this family. It's about how each of them is still reacting to wounds that were inflicted not today or yesterday, but sometimes 10 years in the past. Because you do carry that. And when it's family, those wounds resurface and open up really, really quickly. And that was actually quite a big part of the class that we did. Another interesting thing that we did in that class was we would take our characters to therapy and almost do like a role-playing session with an actual therapist. And one of the big things that you would talk about is, as you do in a normal therapy session, you try to work out where the root cause of the trauma is. And that means going back to old wounds and the emotional sort of scars that we all carry.
And again, now you're asking yourself why it's called The Inheritance, just one of the many reasons it's called The Inheritance. We never do spoilers. We don't even get near spoilers, so we'll not even go there. When I look over here, I'm looking at the comments. I'm saying to you people in the comments, we're not going to do spoilers. But how do you, as I said at the beginning, and then we'll go to questions from the audience, I was just haunted by this book. I have been and still am haunted by the book. It's one of the best book club books. If any of you have a book club, this is the book to read. I promise you will be there for hours talking about it. How do you hope people feel Trisha, at the end of reading this book? Besides wanting your next book, besides wanting the next book, how do you hope people feel?
I hope that people are able to, if not agree with how the characters acted, empathize with it, empathize with the characters and understand why they took the decisions that they took. I hope that people have the opportunity, readers have the opportunity to question what they would have done in the same circumstances, and how their choices might be different, if they are different indeed, and what that would mean for the family in play. But I think more than anything else, I think it will. I hope that it, forces readers to question just how justifiable any of our moral positions are when we take positions of judgment against people, how justifiable those are. Because I think, when push comes to shove, we are all capable of doing things that we wouldn't like to believe we are. So, I suppose that's what I'd like people to take away from it.
If that isn't a tantalizing bit of information to hear about The Inheritance, I don't know what is. That is marvelous. And you do, I will say very parenthetically, a wonderful job at motivation, that we completely understand, completely and thoroughly understand why people do what they do. And that is quite a tour de force in psychology. I mean, congratulations in every way. Now, you all remember that we are giving away a copy of The Inheritance to one supremely lucky commenter. So leave a question or a comment. And it is now time for questions. Renee says, is The Inheritance the same title and cover in the UK as in the US?
Same title, different cover.
What is the cover of the UK?
I wish I had a copy to show you, but I don't, even though I'm in the UK and it's publication week.
Well, that's because everybody's already purchased it. Is it an island or is it art?
It's an island. It's an island. It's sort of gray, and with the font is all in red.
Oh, that's beautiful. That sounds great.
It's quite a stunning cover.
And was the title the same?
The title is the same, yes.
And was it always called The Inheritance?
No, it was not. It was called The Last Resort when I was writing it. But I preferred The Inheritance when we came up with that. So.
I think there's also another book, The Last Resort, right?
Exactly. So that was very much a working title.
Although I do see how The Last Resort is nicely multi-layered as well. Who else has a question? Do you see yourself, hey, Katie, do you see yourself in any of the characters?
We were just talking about this earlier, weren't we? I totally see myself in Myra. I'm the older sibling, and I think Myra resonates with me the most out of all of the characters. She's also the character that came to me the first. Oh. And an interesting piece of information about her is that my niece was named after her. My sister-in-law was pregnant when I was first conceptualizing the novel. She loved the name, and she asked me if she could borrow it in case she ended up having a daughter. Of course, my niece thinks that the character is named after her, so we'll keep that secret.
And again, adding to the layers of The Inheritance. Now there's actually a person who inherited the name from the book, which has got to be great. I love that. Who else has a question? Mighty Blaze wants to know. This is Margaret in the back room. What, if any, paper and pen tools do you use for outlining, for characters, for structure? And Margaret also wants to know if you use red yarn on your chart.
I did not use red yarn on my chart. And, actually I have it here because I started the novel whilst I was in London. I have a massive pin board that I always use. So it's, I don't know whether it's A2 or A0 or something. It's huge. It's about that big. I split it up into 8 sections because I like to do an 8-act structure. And then I use a bunch of Post-its and things. No red yarn, but there's plenty of color-coded Post-its, different color pens for different characters as well. Pen, paper, notebooks, I'm easy.
The structure of the book has several points of view. And look how pretty it is. This is an advanced copy, but you can still see it's already gorgeous. Did it start out being in multiple points of view?
Yes, it was always multiple points of view. I like being able to look at the same situation from different angles.
Yeah, very much. We like it too. It was really fun to read. We have time for one more question. Is there one more question? Do you personally, Deborah says, hey, Deborah, do you personally do anything special for your launch day?
I always have a glass of champagne. I always take myself out for a nice lunch. I never go for lunch with anyone else. I always take myself out because I feel like writing the book is such a solitary experience. I want to congratulate myself and just have that moment for myself. And then, in the evening, I might go out with friends or family or whatever. But lunch is a special meal just for myself with a nice glass of champagne.
I love that solo lunch idea. I think about you at your desk and at your board, working on this and thinking about your characters, and you just be so in the present and say, I did this. That is lovely. That is lovely. And Katie's saying, do you have any pub day rituals? Now we know it is the pub day lunch, and then friends afterward. It's great. Up champagne glasses. We will too as well. And we'll be clinking glasses for a winner. Let us go to the Wheel of Fun right now and see who will be the lucky person to look at all those people who are here. We're going to draw for the winner. Yes, we do. I love this going by. The suspense. This is the suspense. And the winner is Margaret in the back room. This shows you that it's random. It's not, it's just spinning. It doesn't know. Who will get this book? And it is Shannon Hansen. This is marvelous. Shannon, you will absolutely love this book. Shannon was one of our very first viewers of Crime Time. And so I'm delighted that you won this today. That is marvelous. Trisha, thank you so much for being here today. The time flew by.
It really did. Thank you so much for having me, Hank. I've loved chatting to you about The Inheritance. Well, thank you for being here.
Oh, and I wish you would come to the United States. This book is going to be such. Are you coming?
I don't have anything planned yet, but never say never. Hopefully soon.
You never know. I would love to see you come to Boston. Before I let you go, let me just tell you that next week we will have Jillian McAllister's Famous Last Words. You know her book, Wrong Place, Wrong Time. You've loved that book. If you haven't read it, in about 30 seconds, go get it because it's fabulous and changed my life. And I'm only this far in this book now, but so far, so completely fabulous. Jillian McAllister next week at 4 p.m. ET right here on Crime Time. Until then, best wishes, Trisha, with your fantastic book. Congratulations on it.
Thank you.
My pleasure. I'm glad you could be here today. Thanks for staying up late in London to come talk with us today. And the rest of you, thank you so much for being here. We absolutely adore having you here. And remember, it is always safe inside a book. And we will see you next time.